Today, we are delving into a pressing issue that is sparking widespread discussion across South Africa: the allegations of unequal treatment during protests based on racial dynamics. This topic, recently highlighted by African Transformation Movement (ATM) leader Vuyo Zungula, challenges us to reflect on the deeply ingrained structures of inequality and the legacy of apartheid that continues to shape modern South Africa. Zungula has brought attention to what he sees as a disturbing pattern: protests led by Black South Africans often being met with harsh policing and violence, while demonstrations led by other groups receive significantly less pushback. His statements have touched a nerve in a nation that is still grappling with issues of systemic inequality and justice. To fully understand the gravity of this matter, we need to explore its historical roots. South Africa's past is defined by the apartheid era, a period marked by racial segregation and oppression. Black South Africans were systematically denied basic rights, from political representation to access to resources, while white minority rule imposed a rigid structure of economic and social control. Even with the end of apartheid in 1994 and the introduction of a democratic government, many of these inequalities have persisted, embedded in societal and institutional frameworks. Protests have always been a powerful tool for change in South Africa. From the anti-apartheid demonstrations of the 1970s and 1980s to more recent movements demanding service delivery and economic justice, they have been instrumental in shaping the country's path forward. However, what Zungula is pointing out is not merely about the act of protesting but how those protests are perceived and handled by authorities. He argues that Black South Africans often face a disproportionate and aggressive response, which sends a troubling message about whose voices are deemed legitimate in the eyes of the state. His critique comes against the backdrop of several high-profile protests where Black South Africans demanded basic rights, better living conditions, access to clean water, and an end to economic inequality. These protests, according to Zungula, are frequently met with excessive police force, including rubber bullets, tear gas, and mass arrests. In contrast, he suggests, protests led by other communities are often allowed to proceed with minimal interference, and in some cases, even with a degree of sympathy from the public and authorities. This perceived double standard raises significant questions about fairness and justice in a country that prides itself on its democratic values. To put this into perspective, let's look at recent examples. When Black communities have gathered to demand basic services like housing and sanitation, reports of violent clashes with law enforcement have surfaced. Yet, protests in other parts of the country, sometimes over far less urgent matters, have proceeded without the same level of crackdown. Zungula's assertion that it seems everyone else has the right to protest except Black South Africans is not just a political statement, it is a reflection of frustrations felt by many who believe that their voices are being systematically marginalized. This issue ties into broader concerns about the role of law enforcement in South Africa. The police have often been criticized for heavy-handed tactics, particularly in impoverished and predominantly Black communities. These actions not only undermine trust between citizens and the state but also perpetuate a cycle of fear and resentment. When protesters feel that their grievances are not taken seriously and that their efforts to demand change are met with violence, it becomes increasingly difficult to foster a sense of national unity and progress. Zungula's call for a national dialogue on the issue is both timely and necessary. Such a dialogue could serve as a platform to address the systemic biases in how protests are policed and to reaffirm the rights of all citizens to voice their concerns without fear of retaliation. However, initiating this dialogue is no small task. It requires the willingness of policymakers, community leaders, and law enforcement to confront uncomfortable truths and commit to meaningful reforms. The ATM leader's remarks have sparked a wave of discussions, not just within political circles but among ordinary South Africans. Many are questioning whether the country's current approach to managing protest aligns with its constitutional values. The right to protest is enshrined in South Africa's constitution, yet the uneven enforcement of this right undermines the principle of equality before the law. Addressing this issue is not just about reforming policing practices, it is about reaffirming the country's commitment to justice and inclusivity. Looking ahead, what does this mean for South Africa? The path forward involves acknowledging and addressing the systemic inequalities that continue to plague the nation. This includes re-evaluating how law enforcement operates, particularly in the context of protests, and ensuring that all citizens are treated with dignity and respect. It also involves amplifying the voices of marginalized communities and creating spaces where their concerns can be heard and addressed constructively. This issue is not just about the present, it is about the future. How South Africa chooses to respond to these concerns will have a lasting impact on its social and political fabric. By addressing the inequalities in how protests are handled, the country can take a significant step toward building a more equitable and unified society. Now, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Vuyo Zungula's comments? Do you think South Africa is doing enough to ensure that all citizens have the right to protest without fear of violence? What steps do you believe are necessary to address these disparities? Share your insights in the comments below. We are looking forward to hearing your perspectives and engaging in a meaningful discussion. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. If you found this video thought-provoking, give it a thumbs up and share it with others who might be interested in this important topic. Your support helps us continue to bring you in-depth analysis and discussions on the issues that matter most. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.